Thank you very much, Olga. Ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the OECD, I would like to welcome you to the second webinar on progress and challenges in the fight against corruption in Eastern Europe and Central Asia. Today's event is dedicated to the fight against high-level corruption and the need to ensure independence of prosecutors to enable them to lead this fight. The very high level of speakers and the impressive number of participants confirms that this issue is the top priority for anti-corruption practitioners. This is true not just in countries in Eastern Europe and Central Asia, but at this unique time globally as well. Today we face an unprecedented global crisis triggered by COVID-19. It is not only a health and economic crisis, but also a crisis in trust in our democracies and in the fairness of global deliverance system. To rebuild this trust, governments around the world need to show to their citizens that everyone is equal before the law, including the powerful and the rich. This is not an easy task, but past experience and today's developments show that it can be done if we have the commitment to do it. The OECD contributes to this task in several ways. As you know, the OECD develops and monitors the implementation of standards, including in the areas of anti-corruption and integrity. Article 5 of the OECD Convention on Combating Bribery of Foreign Public Officials in International Business Transactions demands from its parties to ensure the independence of law enforcement authorities from any interference, regardless of the officials involved and of the economic or diplomatic considerations. We have seen cases when parties violated this article, and in response, we demanded the governments remove any undue influence and prevent such possibilities in the future. The OECD also develops tools to strengthen the integrity of high-level officials. The disclosure of assets and interest by high-level politicians is becoming a universal norm, which we discussed during the first webinar in this series in December. Further, the organization promotes the disclosure of beneficiary owners of companies. We will be discussing this and other interesting issues related to compliance, ethics, and integrity in the private sector in the spring, in the framework of the Global Roundtable on Business Integrity. We're hoping the date will soon be announced, and we not only welcome you to take part in this event, but we really encourage you to take part in this event. This is an area where participation and commitment is very important. The fourth edition of the ACN's flagship publication, Anti-Corruption Reforms in Eastern Europe, Progress and Challenges, shows the countries of the region have now achieved good progress in upgrading their anti-corruption legislation and building anti-corruption institutions. They have also done a lot to tackle administrative corruption using e-solutions and other tools. The report boldly identifies the next target, high-level corruption. It is the grip of corrupt politicians and oligarchs and economies that hinders the development of countries and the prosperity of citizens. The second report we are launching today, The Independence of Prosecutors in Eastern Europe, Central Asia, and Asia Pacific, is equally important. The independence of prosecutors, especially those dealing with high-level corruption, is vital to ensure the rule of law and social justice. But guaranteeing this independence is a continuous challenge, not only for developing and emerging economies, but also for older democracies, including all the members of the OECD. With these two excellent reports in our hands, I'm looking forward to the discussion today among some of the top anti-corruption leaders of the region. Your experience, your ideas on how to free your countries from high-level corruption and enable law enforcement to deliver justice, will inspire the audience and help direct the future work of the Anti-Corruption Network. One of these challenges, in my personal view here, is the need for candor of government officials when talking to citizens and other stakeholders. That has, as we've gone through this crisis, been something from my personal view that has often been lacking. And I think it's something we also need to accomplish. I wish you all an excellent discussion and thank you for giving me the opportunity to participate in opening this important discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Schlagenhauf, for the inspirational words and setting the tone for our discussion. And now I'm very happy to give the steering wheel of this meeting to Laura Stefan, who is our long-lasting partner of the Anti-Corruption Network and one of the very active civil society experts from Romania. Laura, the floor is now fully yours.
Thank you very much, Olga. It is a big joy for me to moderate the discussion today, and I think we are touching upon two of the most sensitive issues: independence of prosecutors and fight against high-level corruption. For many years, independence was used mostly in relation to justices, to judges, to the judiciary, rarely in relation to prosecutors. But I think the recent years have pushed us to realize that without an independent prosecution service, we cannot even talk about a fair and efficient criminal justice delivery. Because at the end of the day, it is the prosecutors who decide what cases are going to be investigated and what cases are going to rest on the shelves. Whether we have mandatory prosecution or discretionary prosecution, given the wealth of data that come towards prosecutors throughout in all countries of this world, prosecutors will have to make a judgment. And we, the people, need to know that that judgment is based on their professional capacities and on themselves rather than on external forces that might intervene and push prosecutors to make a decision or another. By whom do we want to have this independence? From whom? It can be the politicians, and we have seen super aggressive reactions of politicians vis-a-vis prosecutors that were doing their work. It can be from oligarchs who are going to stop at nothing from using all the tools they have in order to defend themselves against investigations. Or it can be from other areas with which the prosecutors are intrinsically linked, be it the law enforcement or the intelligence. They are the handlers of initial information that goes to prosecutors, and we need to make sure that these processes remain transparent and accountable. High-level corruption, then, it is the perfect situation where you can test judicial prosecutorial independence, because it is there where you have the highest vested interest and the highest risk for top officials and for the kings of the day, as we say in a more civil society type of discourse. The report that the OECD ACN has prepared on independence of prosecutors discusses standards and performance indicators in the area of institutional independence, individual independence, and also recruitment and career, acknowledging that we all have different ways of organizing ourselves inside our countries. I think the big question is, what works in our own conditions, and how do we ensure a proper balance between independence, accountability, transparency of prosecutorial activity? And that is in itself a big challenge, because as we know, investigations have to be kept away from the public eye in parts of their development, not to hamper the result of the investigation. So I think we're going to have a very interesting discussion with our top speakers today. We have Andriy Kuharuk, who's going to discuss the two reports that the ACN OECD has produced. We have Ms. Kioveshi, who has an impressive track record in Romania fighting high-level corruption, and then she's now the European Public Prosecutor, so she's now facing another important challenge, that of establishing an independent prosecution office at European level. With the help and sometimes trying to push member states to make the right decisions in staffing this task force. Then we have the president of Greco, Mr. Marin Mărcela, who's going to discuss with us the findings of Greco in the area of prosecutorial independence. Mr. Kos, who will explore with us the lessons that we can learn from the experience of the OECD working group on bribery. What can we take from that experience, and how can we use those experiences in our own countries? Then we have Mr. Casco, who for many years now has been fighting to reform the prosecutorial office of Ukraine. And I think he has a tremendous experience to share with us about the challenges that come not only from outside factors, but also from within the system, because sometimes we tend to forget that there are also intrinsic and internal challenges when it comes to independence. And then, last but not least, Mr. Oniani from Georgia, who's going to discuss with us the importance of the civil society voice in disclosing high-level corruption. And maybe will also talk to us about the angle of uninvestigated high-level corruption suspicions. In terms of organizational aspects, I will invite the speakers to keep their initial interventions to about 7 minutes. And I will invite all of you to write to us in the chat box or in the question and answers box the questions that you feel would be relevant for our speakers. And I promise I will look at both these discussion boxes and will raise with our speakers the questions that are most interesting. So without further ado, I move to Andriy to talk to us about the findings of the ACN OECD. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. Dear ladies and gentlemen, I am delighted to be among so distinguished panelists today and present results of our work to a large number of participants. I will use a brief PowerPoint presentation for a visual demonstration. So wait a minute. Can you see? Okay.
Yes. Now we don't see the PowerPoint anymore, Andriy.
Okay, let me try again.
Now it works now.
Okay. Okay, so in 2020, the Anti-Corruption Network for Eastern Europe and Central Asia released two important reports, which I would like to briefly present to you today. The first one on the left side of the slide, this is the ACN summary report, our, as the Deputy Secretary General said, flagship publication. We produce this report every 4 or 5 years when we conclude each of our work programs. This report features detailed analysis corruption developments, trends, and challenges in the region for the respective period. And this time we speak about the period of 2016-2019. And the report also provides a set of recommendations on how to further improve policies and practical approaches in the area. While the report covers a wide range of topics, anti-corruption policy, prevention of corruption, law enforcement, pays attention to some specific sectors, today we will speak only about some of its findings. And first, I would like to speak about high-level corruption. While recognizing efforts made by some countries, the report emphasizes that high-level corruption and complex corruption remain key challenges for the region. Most countries focus their law enforcement efforts on petty corruption. At the same time, the most harmful corruption practices often remain without a proper response. We, of course, cannot expect for effective and efficient fight against corruption, especially high-level or high-profile corruption, if the independence of anti-corruption law enforcement bodies, investigators, as well as prosecutors and judges is not ensured. During the previous rounds of the Istanbul Action Plan monitoring, our monitoring mechanism, I will speak a bit more in details later about it. So in the framework of this exercise, we had many discussions with ACN countries about the independence of prosecutors. As highlighted in the summary report, in particular due to the Soviet legacy, the reform of the prosecution services in the Istanbul Action Plan countries has been difficult. The prosecution services in most countries remain highly hierarchical and governed by the decisions of the prosecutor generals. Only several countries have introduced bodies of the prosecutorial self-governance. And the appointment and dismissal of the prosecutor general in most countries are still significantly influenced by political bodies. With considering this, we in parallel worked on another study, which is specifically devoted to the independence of prosecutors. You can see its cover page on the right side of the slide. As you can see from the title, this report went beyond the ACN region by covering also a number of Asia-Pacific countries. This publication describes different approaches and practices applied with respect to the independence of prosecution services and individual prosecutors. The report finds that while the independence of prosecutors is guaranteed in the legislation of many countries around the world, it is essential to ensure that those rules, those principles are respected in practice, and a worrying trend of attempting to unduly influence the prosecutor's decision-making is eliminated. The report contains 69 recommendations that suggest ways to address or avoid various deficiencies in this area. All these findings and conclusions convinced us to pay more attention to these areas, to the fight against high-level corruption and to the independence of prosecutors in the framework of the next round of the Istanbul Action Plan monitoring. A new assessment framework, a new assessment framework will be based on a set of indicators which are the same for all countries. The next round will cover 13 performance areas. As I understand, it's not very well seen on the screen. There is a list on the right side of the slide. There is a list of these performance areas, and you can see specific areas devoted to the independence of prosecution service, which is performance area 6, and also an area devoted to investigation and prosecution of high-level corruption, which is performance area 12. Under each performance area, the level of performance will be assessed using a score of scale scale of 100 to from 1 to 100. Sorry. The score comprises points received by the country under each benchmark included in the performance area. More points will be allocated to the enforcement benchmarks and less related to legal and institutional framework. This is one of the features of the next round of monitoring, when we will be focusing more on enforcement rather than on laws or institutional setup, which were covered under the previous rounds of monitoring. Right now, we are already in the middle of the pilot testing of the new monitoring methodology, which should be concluded in July with the adoption of the pilot reports. We have 5 countries under the pilot evaluation. These are Moldova, Ukraine, Georgia, Azerbaijan, and Armenia. And right after that, we will start preparations to the full-fledged monitoring process. So now let me specifically focus or say several words about these 2 performance areas. First, Independence of Prosecution Service. Here you can see the list of performance indicators. As you can see, we will pay particular attention to appointment of the Prosecutor General, to appointment and promotion of other prosecutors, to the budget of the prosecution services and remuneration, also status and mandate of the prosecutorial councils and or similar bodies, or a similar body if some countries have such, assignment of cases among prosecutors, and accountability of prosecutors. And under the accountability, our primary focus will be disciplinary liability of prosecutors, but there are also specific benchmarks related to corruption allegations committed about corruption offenses allegedly committed by prosecutors. So for you to better understand, under each of these indicators, there is also a list of more specific benchmark with a specific points given if the country meets that benchmark. And then in the end, in each performance area, the country can receive up to 100 points. And this is the slide devoted to the performance area 12, investigation and prosecution of high-level corruption. We will focus on fight against high-level corruption as a policy priority. We also look into how criminal statistics on high-level corruption is collected and analyzed and used for further changes. High-level corruption, and also we will pay attention to the detection and investigation of high-level corruption. Here, we will look in different investigative techniques, international cooperation in corruption cases, and also how all public allegations of high-level corruption, if they find a proper reaction from law enforcement institutions. And you see that the most part of all the points will be given to the enforcement part of this performance area, liability for high-level corruption offenses. Here we will look at the sentences, at the concrete sentences applied in high-level corruption cases. And you can see it's a good example, I guess, that if the country does not actively enforce high-level corruption offenses, then it will lose the most of the points. Or vice versa, if the country properly enforces, properly reacts by law enforcement means to high-level corruption, it's possible to get a higher score because 65 points is given to this specific enforcement area. That's it for the moment, and I will be happy to participate in further discussion and reply to any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Andrei. I think we all acknowledge and appreciate how difficult it is to actually measure performance in the field of high-level corruption and equally in the field of prosecutorial independence. With that, we move to Ms. Kövesi. Ms. Kövesi, thank you for being with us today. We know that you have faced huge challenges in defending the independence of the DNA in Romania. And I think this fight has had European reverberations, so I expect many of our participants to know about the challenges and how they were dealt with. We want to ask you, how do you see the situation with the European Prosecution Office in matters of independence? And if you can discuss with us today, what are the challenges and how do you see ways to address them, to overcome them, so that we do have, at the end of the day, a European Prosecution Office able to fight crime in Europe? We cannot hear you. I think you're muted. If you can unmute.
Okay,
Yes,
can
now
you
it's
hear me
fine.
now? Okay, thank you. Thank you, Laura. Thank you to all of you, especially for the invitation to be today with you and to discuss about this very important issue related to the independence of prosecutors. I think it's important to discuss, especially because in the last period, we saw in some European countries. I read the two studies made by OECD, and I have to say that I was impressed by the quality of the analysis and also by the complexity of the results and the conclusions that you presented. Why it's important to have this study? Because when we speak about combating corruption, it's not enough to take into consideration only the investigations and convictions. To have efficiency in reducing the phenomena of corruption, it is also important to prevent and to educate people into anti-corruption. So in this context, what OECD is doing is a viable solution to take a public stand and to draw attention to the seriousness of the corruption and the role of the independence of judiciary. Because when we speak about corruption, we have to take into consideration the independence of justice and to be aware of the fact that corruption is a threat to rule of law and democracy. In my view, based on my previous experience, I can say that there are three important premises in obtaining good results in the fight against corruption. First, the independence of the judicial system, but as Laura already underlined, in the last period of time, it's important to speak about the independence of prosecutors. Second premise is to have a specialized and independent structure in combating corruption, and very important to have a legislation which offers efficient investigative tools to tackle corruption. And in order to obtain credible and real results in the fight against high-level corruption, it is essential for prosecutors to be independent from political factors. But in general, I think this independence should be doubled by responsibility and accountability. In my view, only a professional, independent, and honest justice system can efficiently fight against corruption. Based on the study that you made, I saw that there are no common standards requiring more independence of the prosecutor system, and that we can see a plurality of models that exist now in this field. So in this context, I would like to speak about the European Public Prosecutor Office. Based on its regulation, EPPO will be an independent institution. And the independence is a crucial role for the functioning of the EPPO. And this should be a model followed by all national public prosecutor office. And I would like to think that in time, EPPO will be a standard for all the prosecutorial offices. How the independence of EPPO is guaranteed? First of all, we have a regulation, we have provision in the regulation saying that EPPO is independent by the European institution, agencies and bodies, is independent by all the authorities from the participating member states. There will be 22 European prosecutors at central level on Luxembourg, one per participating member state. These 22 European prosecutors will supervise investigation which will be performed by the European delegated prosecutors in each participating member state, and the European delegated prosecutors will be embedded in the national system. It's important to say that the EPPO will be prosecutor in front of the national courts that, of course, at least in those 22 participating member states are independent. All the European delegated prosecutors will be part of EPPO. So this means that they will be also independent, so the national specificities cannot influence their work. So when we speak about the independence of EPPO, we have to take into consideration a few points. First, that the independence of EPPO is guaranteed by the regulation. Second, the procedure for appointing European Chief Prosecutor, European prosecutors, and European delegated prosecutors. This procedure, I think, it's another guarantee to be sure that the activity of EPPO will be independent, because one of the conditions that the prosecutors who will be appointed as European prosecutors or European delegated prosecutors, it's to be an active member of the Public Prosecution Office, and his or her independence should be beyond doubt. Another guarantee of the EPPO independence is the procedure that EPPO will follow in the criminal investigation. I think the regulation brings something very new, a new model that it's a new model for the prosecutors, because I'm referring to the permanent chamber. What the permanent chambers will do? One permanent chamber will be composed by 3 European prosecutors from different participating member states, and it will supervise the investigation made in the other participating member states. As an example, I will be in a permanent chamber with the European prosecutor from Czech Republic and from Latvia, and we will supervise investigation in a case from Spain or Bulgaria or Germany. And of course, this model is new for prosecutors because the decision will be taken by 3 prosecutors, not only by 1, that usually is the chief prosecutor, but now we will have 3 European prosecutors who will take the decisions in the cases and who will give instructions to the handling European delegated prosecutors. And more important, the allocation of the cases for each permanent chambers will be randomly. Based on the decision that the College of the European Prosecutor took last year, we will have 15 permanent chambers, and all the cases that EPPO will register will be randomly allocation. So I think this model, it's already a guarantee that no one can interfere into the investigations, and in this way we can be sure that the decisions will be based on the legal provisions and strong evidence. Well, as usual, the theory, in theory, everything sounds good. Let's see in practice how it will be. Because I have to be honest and to say that to set up the European Public Prosecutor Office, it's a real challenge because of 2 reasons. First of all, we don't have a precedent, so we have to create precedent. And secondly, because we have to harmonize 22 different criminal codes and 22 different criminal procedure codes. But I said about the theory, I want to say that even if this provision from regulation sounds great and perfect, in reality it's not like this. And I will give you some examples related to the risks that can affect the independence of the European Public Prosecutor Office. The first, even if the European delegated prosecutors will have a perfect CB, they will be proposed by the member states to the College of the EPPO. We can check the CV, the entire professional activity of the European delegated prosecutors. But of course, we don't know all the prosecutors in Europe. And the CV cannot show us if they are courageous, if they are honest, if they are their standards of integrity, it's very high. risk, because even if the independence of prosecutors is guaranteed by the law, in reality, it's very important the quality of each prosecutor, the professionalism and the personal qualities. Second risk that we have, it's the fact that based on the regulation, as maybe you already know, there is a possibility to have part-time prosecutors and full-time prosecutors. This means that we have the possibility to have a European delegated prosecutors double-headed, to be subordinated to the permanent chambers and to EPPO, but in the same time to be subordinated to the general prosecutor or chief prosecutor in his or her respective member states. As a European chief prosecutor, I have to have consultation with all the participating member states and to establish the number of the European delegated prosecutors and also the regime. And I said from the beginning that to achieve... Sorry?
No,
I spoke...
go on, Ms. Kioveshi.
Sorry.
Continue.
I thought, okay.
I think Olga unmuted herself. Yes.
Okay, in order to be sure that the activity of EPPO will be 100% independent, in my view, we need to have full-time prosecutors, because otherwise this can be an issue. And I do not want to imagine how it will be for a prosecutor who will investigate a case with, let's say, VAT with a damage more than 10 million euros that falls under the EPPO jurisdiction. And he is also subordinated to EPPO and to his general prosecutor. How independent this person can be when he has to send the case to EPPO and to exercise the right of evocation and to decide that this case should be investigated by the EPPO, not by the national authorities, knowing that his boss is also the general prosecutor that can solve the conflict of these competencies, and also the EPPO. The good news is that the most majority, let's say the majority of the member states understood this thing, and we will have only full-time prosecutors, but we still have negotiations with Cyprus. And of course, they said that Cyprus is a small country. The workload do not justify to have prosecutors full-time for EPPO, but based on our estimation, up to 10% of the cases that EPPO will have will come from Cyprus. So in this case, I think this can be a risk for EPPO to not have full-time prosecutors, but we are still negotiating, we are still continue the consultation. I hope in the end we will have the full-time prosecutors. And the third risk for EPPO is the budget, because when we speak about the independence of prosecutors, it's also important to know how the budget it's approved, and if you have enough resources, human resources and material resources to make the investigation. So I don't know if I spoke more than 7 minutes. I will stop here and I will answer very gladly to all your questions. Thank you very much, Laura.
Thank you very much, Ms. Kioveshi, and thank you for taking us beyond what the law says to the real challenges that actually will make the difference in terms of actual independence. If I could ask you now to mute your microphone, Ms. Kioveshi, and we move to Greco, to the president of Greco, to Mr. Mărcela, who's going to share with us the challenges identified and also the good practices, I hope, in the fourth round evaluation when it came to the independence of prosecutor. Mr. Mărcela, please go ahead.
Thank you very much. You can hear me, right? It's, okay. I have a sign that my internet connection is unstable, but I will try to give the stable presentation now, which will, I hope, not last more than 7 minutes. As you know, the Greco is Council of Europe anti-corruption body that is monitoring prevention of corruption in 50 member states. Kazakhstan recently joined Greco, so we are now at number of 50. We have different themes, but we are now, and today we are talking about the corruption prevention in respect of the prosecutors. And you know that the issue that we are targeting is the independence of the prosecutors from the executive power. There are, of course, as you know, several systems, many systems when we are overseeing. You know, in some of the systems, you know, the prosecution is directly linked to the executive branch because they are part of the Ministry of the Justice. In some other systems, they are not. But in many systems, we see that there is a political influence in the work of the prosecutor, particularly in the recruitment of the prosecutors. Of course, the political influence per se doesn't mean that it's always negative. That's why we are talking undue political influence, which is not good, of course. So when we are monitoring and when we are, let's say, overseeing the corruption prevention in respect of the prosecutors, putting emphasis on the independence of the prosecutors, what we are looking for? We are looking for the Constitution. What are the constitutional provisions? Then we are looking for the law. What are the legal provisions? Then we are looking for something, if there is something that we call soft law, which is usually code of conduct. And then, of course, we come to the equally important part, and that is implementation. In the implementation, we are looking for the issues whether there is training of the prosecutors, whether there is a supervisory mechanism, whether there is accountability measures, and whether there is a transparency. So let's say those 4 points are looked through the several topics that we are overseeing. One of that is organizational independence or operational independence, whether there is existing. And that is not only, you know, the legal provisions, but also the practice. There, in every case, there should be safeguards against government intervention in individual cases. And of course, we have the different model that we said. For instance, in some countries, you know, prosecutions are tied to the Ministry of the Justice, but even in those cases, there should be, you know, safeguards for the independence. Prosecution services also sometimes, and even some of them are very proud of that, to be construed in a hierarchical level. In these cases, for instance, we said that if there is, for instance, a possibility to give direct suggestions how to deal with some case, we have a standard provision that such decisions from the superiors need to be justified and documented. So it could be not over the phone, but it could be writing and it could be in the file. That's, for instance, one aspect of the operational independence. The other thing is the recruitment, which I think is the crucial one, not only for, I would say, deputies, but mainly for the prosecutor generals and the other prosecutors that are in charge of your deputies. So we have seen quite a number of systems where political concerns influence recruitments to the prosecution service, in particular to the top positions. In these situations, we recommended a change. Political involvement in these processes is to be avoided to the extent possible. Where the country have the prosecutorial councils, it should be deprived from the interference from the politicians. That's why we issued a number of recommendations where, for instance, excuse me, Ministry of the Justice should not be part of the prosecutorial council. When we are discussing that, one question always pop up, at least in my head. Of course, it could be signed off, some other issues or concerns. But my question is, why the politicians? Why the politicians wants to have influence in the nomination or appointment of the prosecutor general? Why? Or same goes to the president of the Supreme Court. Why? I mean, why there is a need for president or for the parliament or for the prime minister to have something to say about that if we have a separation of power? Why? It could be a rhetorical question, of course. The other area that we are dealing is a case management, and I think that Ms. Koveshi mentioned a random allocation of the cases, which is, of course, I think a standard that should be applied. So no hand pickup and no allocation of the cases. Oh, I see Laura, Stefan, you will deal with that case. You know? So this is not what it should be. It should be automatical, randomly allocation cases based on the pre-established objective criteria, of course. Another issue that we are dealing is the conflict of interest, and the conflict of interest is perfectly dealt with the code of conduct and the transparency and the training and the supervision mechanism of the conflict of interest. In many cases, we see that the people actually do not understand what the conflict of interest is. The conflict of interest is not only whether my brother is a prosecutor and I'm the defendant, but it goes way beyond that. It goes way beyond that. Secondary activities, contact with the third parties, confidential breaches, post-employment situation, gifts. Am I allowed as a prosecutor to receive a gift? You know, well, from my father for a birthday, definitely, but you know, from the defendant who is, or from the interested party in the case, definitely not. But this is everything what we are, you know, discussing, and when we are issuing those recommendations. The code for conduct also needs to be easy accessible to the public and needs to be complemented by measures of their implementation. And of course, the key word is, of course, transparency. And then control, we have a requirement for a body that will have adequate autonomy and independence when prosecutors need to be prosecuted for disciplinary measures or for a breach of the code of conduct. I'm not talking about the criminal prosecution, but about the breach of code of conduct. There is also a question of immunity for the prosecutors, but luckily only in very few countries prosecutors enjoy far-reaching immunity. We have a standard, and we are not advocating, we are recommending to, if there is immunity, it should be functional immunity. So this is basically overview. I have a data if that will be possible or necessary, you know, to see how many recommendations are to the certain countries. But in the end, everything comes to the 2 points, which in my view is important, not only regarding the independence of prosecutors, but also fight against corruption, and that is political will. The first one and the second one is a good people. We need a good people. Thank you for now.
Thank you, Mr. Murcela, for raising the issue of people, because I think this is the big elephant in the room. We can have beautiful rules and procedures. If we don't have the right people there, it's all for nothing. And that's why we insist on putting together in the same sentence independence with accountability and integrity when we talk about independence of prosecutors. With that, we move to the chairman of the OECD Working Group on Bribery, Mr. Kos. Please tell us, what can we take from the experience of your group and use in our countries, in the ACN countries? Go ahead, Mr. Kos. You're muted. Yes, you're fine now.
Thank you, Laura. I have to say, it's a real pleasure to see so many friends being connected to today's conference. And I just feel sorry that we cannot meet in person. So today we are discussing high-level corruption and independence of prosecutors. And I have to say that those two features are closely linked to each other. Although I have to say that, let's say, in the working group on bribery, the OECD, which I have the privilege to chair, we don't put too much emphasis on high-level corruption as such, because majority of cases we are dealing with are cases of high-level corruption. As I said, we are 44 member states. We are called the Club of the Rich, and we deal with international bribery, which means with foreign bribery. But before getting to our experience, I would like to say two things. Two reports of the OECD have been mentioned already. The first one on the anti-corruption reforms in Eastern Europe and Central Asia. And there are really very good, statements in them concerning the independence of prosecutors. Let's say in the first one, you have the prosecutors should be autonomous and should perform their duties free from external pressure or interference. And if you take a look at the report, you will find there are not more and not less, but 10 recommendations concerning the independence of prosecutors in the report. And the second one, which is especially dealing with independence of prosecutors in Eastern Europe, Central Asia, and Asia Pacific, it is a sentence which I like very much, which is the independence of prosecutors is crucial issue in the fight against corruption. And I would just like to add here, not on the paper, but also in practice. This is what we do in the OECD. We are assessing how our member states are enforcing the OECD Anti-Bribery Convention. And in this convention, there is Article 5, which is unique article in any of the international anti-corruption conventions, because it is saying that investigation and prosecution of the bribery shall not be influenced by consideration of national economic interest, the potential effect upon relations with another state, or the identity of the natural or legal persons involved. Basically, this article means we have to apply the rule of law equally against anybody. It doesn't matter who is the target of our investigations or prosecutions, we have to apply the law. So we are of course, we are also dealing with technical elements of the prosecutorial autonomy or independence, but we go even a step further, and let's say the worst situation which can happen for our member states, and the countries really hate if this happens to them, is that we say something in connection with this Article 5. I have collected from the publicly available reports some cases where we were very, let's say, strict. And let's say we said for Turkey, that Turkey has to take all necessary steps to ensure that any reassignment of police, prosecutors, magistrate does not adversely affect in bribery investigations and prosecutors. Because we found out that after the investigation of sons of one of the top political persons in the country, around 1,500 police officers, prosecutors, and judges were either retired or transferred to other positions. Then we had the case of Canada, which was basically in all media 2 years ago. We said that political factors must not influence investigations and prosecutions. And we are dealing with a case where the prime minister of the country was pressing the attorney general of the country to change her decision and to launch the procedure which would be milder for the company which was suspected of committing a crime. In the case of Latvia, we said that serious personal issues and negative government commentary concerning the work of the Latvia's anti-corruption law enforcement agency are casting doubts over its capacity to enforce those laws. So we're not only dealing with, let's say, hardcore issues such as, let's say, breaching the law and undermining the independence of prosecutors, but we're also saying that negative government comments can have negative effects. This year, basically it was last year, we adopted the report of the United States on the United States, and we have not less than 6 paragraphs dealing with so-called Article 5 issues, because we noticed some practices in the US which were very close to let's say, political interference into the work of prosecutors. But since we are only dealing with foreign bribery, and we were not able to identify any such issue in relation to foreign bribery offenses, we said there is no problem there. There would be absolutely different conclusion if we would deal with corruption in general terms. If you read our public statement about Brazil, you will see in the title already, we are saying Brazil must immediately end threats to independence and capacity of law enforcement to fight corruption. And I have to say that I just chose those countries randomly, but I can really witness to something which someone has said already, that pressure against prosecutors in the world is mounting. But what we see in the working group of bribe is the following. If there's a robust legal framework protecting the independence of prosecutors in theory, those prosecutors have much better chances to defend their independence also in practice. Meaning that if countries have a very good legal framework in place, ensuring the independence and autonomy of prosecutors, this still does not mean that there will be no attempts to, let's say, decrease this independence or autonomy or to breach it. But the prosecutors have much better chances to defend from such occasions than in the countries without such a framework. And of course, international pressure will only happen if those are, let's say, the standards are really followed. And this is the link to the high-level corruption. When the prosecutors' independence is assured, they will also much more easily go after the high-level corruption offenses. And we can witness this in many of our countries in the group. And let us not forget anything. Prosecutors are human beings, so not all of them are ideal. Some of them are weak, some of them are even corrupt. So with such a legal framework in place, ensuring the independence and autonomy, weak or corrupt prosecutors will not have an excuse for not doing what they would have to be doing. And last but not least, what we also see in the last cases is that independence of prosecutors only makes sense if also judiciary is independent. Let's say we see cases, one of them is my country, where the prosecutors are heavily under pressure, and when the executive branch of power understands that they will not breach the prosecutors, the pressure against the judiciary is mounting. So maybe this should be an idea for the next conference, like the one today, but let us do our homework first. Let us protect our prosecutors from external and internal undue pressures, and we will see that immediately the fight against high-level corruption will improve significantly.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kos, and thank you very much for putting this very clearly before our eyes, that indeed serious investigations against high-level corruption is a proof, is an indicator of independent prosecution. And once you have independent prosecution, it is then that you see how much independence you actually have in courts and how much permeable is the judiciary to political influence at the end of the day. Or else we are just looking at how the situation looks on paper rather than being able to explore how it all goes in practice. With that, we move to Vitaly Kasko. Mr. Kasko has been involved, as I said, for many years in reforming the Ukrainian prosecution service, which is a huge task. And I think I would like him to touch upon the dangers that lie within the system. Because we've been talking a lot about influences that come from outside, but then how does independence of prosecution and all these standards assemble in an effort to reform the prosecution service? Because it is a bit counterintuitive that you're going to reform the prosecution service while ensuring independence to individual prosecutors and while ensuring independence for the prosecutorial system. I can easily picture a situation where while a system is being reformed, the system itself would yell, accusing influences and undue influences in its work. So tell us the story of Ukraine. I think it is very illustrative for many of us. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura, for introduction. Indeed, I participated as a Deputy Prosecutor General in several attempts to reform the Ukrainian Prosecutor's Office in 2015 and 2019. The first attempt after the Revolution of Dignity was to create an Inspectorate General to detect and also investigate corruption crimes committed by prosecutors. We caught high-ranking prosecutors on a large bribe who turned out to be proxies of the Prosecutor General. What a surprise. As a result, the Prosecutor General and the President, who were godfathers, succeeded in resigning all key people of the Inspectorate. The second attempt in 2019 involved the overall attestation of prosecutors for both integrity and professional skills. It ended with the vote of non-confidence to the Prosecutor General by the Parliament and the resignation of his entire team in the beginning of last year. But the real reason for resignation was that the attestations in the PGO led to the dismissal of senior corrupt prosecutors, so-called hubs or viceroys, if you wish, who actually represented the interests of politicians, oligarchs, and large financial and industrial groups in the PGO. Until the last moment, they didn't believe that these attestations would take place and that their real bosses wouldn't be able to somehow agree on keeping them in the prosecution service. That's probably worth going back in history to give a background. It demonstrates very well the close connection between grand corruption or high-level corruption, as it is named in the study, and the prosecution service lacking independence. Traditionally, the Ukrainian prosecution service has been formed for years as a highly hierarchical institution headed by the Prosecutor General, who was selected by the President from among those close to him, who also had to receive votes in the Parliament for appointment. To do this, the candidate had to compromise with parliamentary factions, most of which they're actually controlled by oligarchs. Moreover, Parliament could at any time and without any explanations declare a vote of non-confidence to the Prosecutor General, which automatically led to resignation. Taking advantage of this political dependence of the Prosecutor General and given the extraordinary powers of the prosecutors in Ukraine, the oligarchs and other, let's say, pressure groups have always tried and often successfully promoted their own candidates for key positions in the Prosecutor General's office. Not necessarily Prosecutor General or Deputy Prosecutor General, but also head of units, head of departments, head of different divisions, including divisions who should fight corruption. It was before NABU and SAPO was created in Ukraine. Quite often, the situation in the country led to the conclusion of a kind of corrupt consensus between the political authorities and the prosecutor's office. The prosecutor's office carried out all the whims of the authorities, including political persecution, and the authorities and the prosecutor's office turned a blind eye to each other's corruption. An attempt to radically reform the prosecutor's office in 2019 provoked an immediate reaction from the corrupt political leadership, as it jeopardized this consensus. Oligarchs and politicians have realized that their control over the prosecutor's office is under real threat. According to the results of the attestations, all their proteges were fired from the central office. Being the head of one of this commission, I remember very well these prosecutors who came to attestations in Prada watches, with a Rolex watch on their hands, couldn't explain the origin of plots of land, houses and luxury cars. And they're sincerely surprised that they didn't pass the attestation. Next attestations, they are planned in the regional offices. And the politicians responded immediately by dismissing the Prosecutor General. Now, most of those who didn't pass the attestation procedure in 2019, they're again appointed in the prosecution service. The time of our event is not enough to explain all the reasons of the problems in our prosecutor's office. I have named just a few, and this is the tip of the iceberg. In my opinion, surgery, not therapy, is already needed to solve these problems in Ukraine. The approach must be systematic, consistent, and comprehensive. Both rules and people should be changed. In this regard, I would also like to refer to the thematic study on independence of prosecutors Andrei and other participants already mentioned in their speeches, prepared as an OECD ACN project and published last year. It contains a number of detailed recommendations on how to ensure the true independence of prosecutors in the countries of the region, which can be equally applied in the other countries. One of the general recommendations says that the strong guarantees for prosecutors' independence and autonomy in taking decisions free from any undue influence, including political influence and interference on the part of senior prosecutors, shall be clearly defined by law and strictly adhered to in practice. Turning back to Ukraine, what could be the result? The first step is to ensure fair competition without any political influence for the position of the Prosecutor General and his or her true independence from the political power. The second step is to completely reset in a transparent way the staff of service according to strict criteria of integrity and professionalism. Then it will be necessary to ensure the independence of such newly appointed prosecutors within the system, which was always the problem in Ukraine. Such prosecutors, new appointed prosecutors, would in turn select self-government bodies that should balance the system and guarantee their independence. If you change the rules without changing staff, it won't help. If you change the personnel without changing the framework, it won't work either. To start the process, Ukraine would need another window of opportunities with a genuine political will to make prosecution service a real service working in the interests of Ukrainian people instead of being the menace to the society.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kasko. And I think the story from Ukraine tells us just how difficult such a reform is, how much time it takes, how much energy it takes, how much commitment it takes, not only for internal forces, but also for internationals and donors and organizations that choose to actually work on these topics. And what troubles me really is the angle of reversibility, because we've been answering this question with regard to Romania for so many years. How irreversible are the reforms? And I think we know now that everything is reversible. And hearing your story about people that were pushed out of the system, but they managed to come back today, is just another example of how reversible and how fragile these reforms are in our societies. With that, we move to our last speaker, Mr. Oniani, who's coming from Transparency International Georgia, and who will discuss with us the role of civil society and how high-level corruption can actually be uncovered from not within the system necessarily. Mr. Oniani, please.
Thank you very much. I'm happy to build up on what has been said. A very interesting discussion, different angles, different country perspectives. And Georgia's example is, well, I would say somewhat extreme. So in the beginning, it was said by our in the introduction that basically we want to ensure the situation when the prosecutors are free from involvement or influence of the politicians, but also oligarchs. So in Georgia's case, unfortunately, we have all of that in single hypostasis. So we have an oligarch who is also the politician, who is also basically what differs us from the situation in Ukraine. We have this only one oligarch, basically the richest man in the country, who is behind the ruling party. I'm starting basically with kind of myth busting on Georgia, because I mean all of us are kind of know Georgia as a best pupil in the class, the front runner in the region, etc. But unfortunately, the situation is quite different. Like we have the country which was once the kind of the front runner of reforms, including the anti-corruption reforms, now and who had an ambition basically to be, and ambition was as high as not to be just another Eastern European country. That's a quote from one of our prime ministers in the late 2000s. Basically, now we have become just another post-Soviet state with all those problems which there are, like deteriorating quality of democracy, dysfunctional and politically biased institutions, increasing levels of corruption, and consolidation of power in the hands of the ruling party, which has increasingly taken the form of state capture. And trust me, that's not an exaggeration. So it's since 2012 we have a ruling party in power, which was, as I said, united or created by an oligarch, the richest man in the country, whose fortune is 30% of Georgia's GDP, 30, 1/3 of the whole GDP. So there is no one who can finance-wise compete with him. The next richest guy would be probably 10 times less rich. So he's clearly the center. He has the biggest fortune there, and also he has basically all the important leverage there to control the government. So he has populated the government with people personally loyal to him, people either being employed by him in the past, or people who were empowered only kind of by him in their capacities. Like, just to give some examples, like the last two health ministers are his former physicians. The current Minister of Interior is his personal bodyguard, the former one. The head of another law enforcement is another bodyguard, and so on. So basically, that's the way how he controls everything. So, and obviously, in these circumstances, you have when you're basically undertaking the state capture, when you have institutions under your control, the first in line comes the law enforcement, especially in our part of the world. If you want to be effective in controlling the government and the institutions, that's how you start. And with prosecutors in particular, we're having a situation when one of the last prosecutors we had was previously his personal lawyer. The second one was someone said about the godfather, so it was the godfather of his son's child, his grandchild. Another one was a friend of his son. So, I mean, all of that is kind of paralleled with those kind of informal relationships. And obviously, in these circumstances, you would not expect these kind of institutions to effectively react on the corruption cases, especially when according to Georgian legislation, the anti-corruption investigation lies with the prosecutor's office, but also the state security agency, which is one of the most closed, non-transparent law enforcement institutions, also headed by a former employee of that person. So in these circumstances, it's obviously no surprise that we're not having any substantial progress in anti-corruption investigations. We, the civil society, the media representatives have been talking about corruption, I mean, all the time. Like, we very recently published basically a summary document of around 30 cases, 30, of allegedly high-level corruption cases, which were compiled in a very professional way, including by former prosecutors, on which not only there is no result of an investigation, the investigation hasn't started yet. And the last highlight, basically, one of the last prosecutors, one of those whom I mentioned, who was in his previous life was prosecuted was arrested for shoplifting in Germany, and then nevertheless he was elected as a prosecutor, or I would say appointed by that person. After he resigned after that scandal, basically, that it was known that he was arrested for shoplifting. So he became one of the richest businessmen in this country, and he publicly, physically assaulted the acting state auditor together with his bodyguards. And all of that was captured on camera. That was in a public place. Like, that was very public act. And that happened allegedly because of the corruption case investigated by the state audit institution. And guess what? Just a week ago, the court acquitted him. So basically, he was not guilty. He was found not guilty. So I very much subscribe under the statement that judiciary should be clearly the focus of anti-corruption work and anti-corruption fight, and that's exactly what problems we're having here. And the one of the last statements I want to make. So the Georgian example, which clearly shows that even according to those reports which Mr. Kukharuk has just presented, Georgia is, again, one of the best examples there. I mean, Georgian legislation is perfect or near perfect, but in fact, we're having the problems which I'm talking about. So it's clearly very important what kind of people are in charge of those institutions, whether they have this political will to change something. And the very last quote, which I love quoting when we talk about corruption. So, like, basically, we come up with lots of methodologies or lots of frameworks on how to best fight corruption or how to measure corruption or whatever. But unfortunately, the corruption schemes, they evolve, and the people are very, very creative. So I love this quote that fight with corruption is not a kind of a linear process, but it is kind of a game of chess where black pieces are moving too. So we clearly need to adapt to the realities which are clearly very fast changing. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Oniani. And indeed, it is a very small world, right? Full of godfathers and friends and family, even in prosecution services and in the judiciary. So how do you tackle that? And with this, we move to our second part of the event, which is questions and answers. And I want to thank you for the questions that were already addressed. I'll take them in the order I've seen them, so please bear with me. I will start with the first set of questions that refer to the functional independence of prosecutors and also to the Council of Prosecutors that has been seen by many in the early days as the solution, the sun that will save us from winter. So how do you see the action of these groups in practice? Are they a solution? Are they more part of the problem? What is the tipping point that you've seen in your experience when the prosecutorial councils really become a regulatory body that helps, that fosters prosecutorial independence and also deals fairly with the wrongdoings of prosecutors? And I think I will invite Mr. Murcela and other panelists to signal to me if they want to comment on this. We have a number of questions for Ms. Kövesi, of course, about the work of the European public prosecutors. And I will group them and address them in the following intervention. So please, Mr. Murcela and any other panelists that would like to comment on the issue.
Thank you, Ms. Stefan. I would just like to address this question about the effectiveness of the prosecutorial council, because it's very similar to the judicial council for the judges as it is. And I think it goes to both, for both those councils. I think that it could be said this. First of all, for the effectiveness, you have to have a legal basis for composition of the council. How is composed? Who are the members? Where do they come from? And how they are elected or appointed? So the standard of the Council of Europe is that at least half of them should be judges or prosecutors elected by their peers. So not appointed, but elected. And then, of course, when you have, my personal view is that it should be more than a half. So it will, let's say, enable the purely professional interference and the professional look into the work of the prosecutorial council. Then you need to have resources ensured for them. And that, I mean, not only financial, but also material and the human resources. They need to have, the supporting staff that will do for them. That could, be a challenge, a burden for the state. But if they want to have a, let's say, independent decision-making body, then that has to be done. The other thing is also how the people are elected. And I see that the prosecutorial or judicial council is an excellent venue for the new democracies, the new developed democracies. And then I mean with the Eastern Europe, Central and Eastern Europe countries who wants to clearly depart from the political influence of the selection of the deputy prosecutors and the prosecutors and the judges. And I think those councils are an excellent tool. So, but I have to warn you, the most important thing, and I know that I'm boring with that, the most important thing are who are the people who are sitting there. Of course, you can have the, let's say, non-prosecutorial members there, but not the politicians. They could be professors, they could be NGO members, but the majority should be prosecutors or judges if it's a judicial council. But the most important thing is to whom are those people, how they are elected, how the election body will elect those people. And then you need to have some, I would say, moral criteria. They should be, prosecutors who are well known by their independence, by their integrity, by their, their work, and they have to be trusted by the other people. So we see the examples when the members of the councils are not to be proved to have a lot of integrity, and that is the issue. So we just came back to the, to the core, and that is the integrity of the people. So in my opinion, don't go for the huge councils. Better have a, a small operational. It could be related to the size of the not the country, but the number of the prosecutors or the judges. So 7, 9, 11. Have please uneven number, because if you have an even number, then, and if you will think about that, don't give the gold vote to the president, because the president is just primus inter pares. And there are a number of the other issues, but the main issue is composition, resources, and the people who are sitting there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Murcela. We move to Mr. Casco. Is it the solution or the problem, Mr. Casco?
Thank you, Laura. In my view, it's not a solution by itself. So it's like any instrument or tool. It can be a good thing or bad thing, depending on who is applying or using this instrument. So I can give my opinion, because I was one of the drafters of the new version of the law on prosecution service, which was adopted by the parliament in 2014. And in this law, first time in the Ukrainian history, the self-governance of prosecutors was introduced in Ukraine. So in my opinion, it can be very useful and work very well to ensure the real independence of prosecutors, and can be really harmful even for independence of prosecutors. What is prosecutorial self-governance? It's people elected by the prosecutors to represent the interests of prosecutors, to ensure the independence of each individual prosecutor of the country. And if you have prosecutors who are corrupt, who are not independent, whom would they elect as representatives? So they had this experience in our first prosecutorial council. Then the prosecutors from the region had the lists of candidates for whom they should vote, given by the prosecutor general and the people around him. And these people were, of course, elected in these prosecutorial self-government bodies. And in the end, this self-governance just legitimized what prosecutor general did. So this is the example of bad tool of the people, bad people who just used or misused the really good and democratic tool. That is why, as I mentioned in my speech, it's very important first to change the people, to test the people, to use the most strict criteria possible to select fair and professional prosecutors, and then to give them opportunity to elect self-governance. In this situation, it's very simplified, of course, but they need to understand what should be first, what should be second. Only in this situation it is possible to expect that self-governance will be a solution, not something harmful for the independence of prosecutors. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Casco. Can we now move to Ms. Kövesi? We have a set of questions for Ms. Kövesi. I will try to summarize them. And I apologize for that in advance, but there's no other way we can tackle all the questions that are being raised. So the first question, when you have a member state in Europe that has challenges, let's say, with regard to rule of law and judicial independence, is there a way to go around the rule and not appoint a prosecutor from that particular state? And a question also connected to Cyprus from your intervention earlier, if they will not decide to appoint a full-time prosecutors, is there a way to go around this decision of the member state? Then what happens when there are concrete information regarding problems of corruption with the prosecutors that serve for the European Prosecution Office? And also one last question in this set of questions. The college has established a sophisticated mechanism for reallocation of cases when a member of the European Prosecution Office is in a conflict of interest. But our attendee is saying that he failed to identify a clear definition of conflict of interest in the European Prosecution Office. We will continue to collect your questions, but for now I will pass the floor to Ms. Kövesi.
It's a little bit difficult for me to comment on theoretical or hypothetical situation. Until now, we don't have a member state who proposed to appoint the prosecutors, and in that member state to have huge challenges related to rule of law. But if I'm thinking to Romania, for example, because after 2017, we all know that there were a lot of attempts to change the legislation, and the rule of law in Romania was a little bit tackled, let's say that, and we have huge challenges with that. We followed very carefully the procedure. In the letter that I sent to the Minister of Justice, and we agreed about the number of the European delegated prosecutor, I asked to organize transparent procedure. So if it's not a transparent procedure, if based on the documents and the CVs that the candidates submit to their candidacy, we don't have enough information, we will not appoint that prosecutors. But as a rule, because we are a prosecutor office, we cannot start to work in a member state without having prosecutors there, at least one. According to the regulation, we need to have at least two, but we need to have at least one prosecutor to start the activity in the member states. Related to Cyprus, we are still negotiating, we are still in in discussion. This is the beauty of the regulation, that I cannot decide alone. I have to decide together with the member states. The member states cannot decide without me. I cannot decide without the member states. So we have to find a compromise. And in this regard, I invited the General Prosecutor of Cyprus to attend to our college meeting and to discuss about the arguments. Because in my view, the arguments related to the number of the cases, it's not very objective from two main reasons. First of all, EPPO was created to improve the level of protection in the participating member states, to improve the level of protection of European money, especially in participating member states. What this means? This means that now we have huge discrepancies. We have member states where we have 2 or 3 investigations per year, and member states where we have hundreds of investigations. So having EPPO and starting EPPO, we will have a unitary approach related to this phenomena. We will have the same priorities. We will know better the typology, so we can increase the level of protection. And in this way, our European delegated prosecutors will have as a priority to investigate these cases. And I hope these discrepancies will disappear in time. And when we speak about Cyprus, we know that it's a small member state, but we have to take into consideration not only the number of the cases, but also the specificity. And based on my previous position and based on the information that we gathered, we know that there are a lot of rogatory letters for Cyprus, especially for their financial institutions, banks, and private societies that are based on Cyprus. And based on this information, we are thinking that the European delegated prosecutors in Cyprus will have a lot of work to do. Let's see if the General Prosecutor will accept our invitation, and we will continue the dialogue. Related to the conflict of interest inside of EPPO, we are working now to adopt an ethical code for the EPPO, also a disciplinary procedure inside of EPPO, an appraisal procedure inside of EPPO. The college started the activity in September, and we were focused to adopt the internal rules of procedure, the decision related to the permanent chambers and to operations criteria on evocation the cases. But we have a working group that now is trying to finalize the ethical code, and we will define the conflict of interest and all the other rules that our prosecutors should follow in their activity. I hope I answered all the questions.
And about concrete information on corruption regarding to prosecutors in the EPPO?
If our prosecutors will, well, in this case, no one has immunity. If they commit the type of crimes, they should be investigated like the other prosecutors, like the other citizen. No one, it's above the law, including the prosecutors from EPPO. I hope it will not be the case, but you never know. So the procedure will be the same for the other prosecutors and for the other citizens.
Thank you, Ms. Kövesi. We'll probably come back to you because I think there are other questions. I'll just have to locate them. Now we're moving to Mr. Cucaruc to discuss a little bit the plans of OECD/OECD ACN. So the first question is whether OECD has ever looked at the manner in which states handle cases of threats or violence against prosecutors. I'm sorry we don't have Mr. Kos with us anymore. He had to leave to take part in another important discussion. But I will ask you to address this question too. And then another question regards the potential improvement of the ACN performance indicators after the pilot evaluations that will take place in 2021, and also whether the anti-corruption action plan intends to build more synergies with other groups that coexist in this world of international monitoring, such as, for example, Greco or the UNCAC.
Thank you, Laura, and thanks to respective participants for the questions. I will start with threats to prosecutors or safeguards of prosecutors and their family members. We looked into this issue in the framework of our work on the Independence of Prosecutors study. And we were surprised, first of all, to find that many countries do not maintain statistics on the safeguard measures applied to prosecutors and their family members. And this is, in my opinion, a first flag that the situation is not followed properly, is not analyzed. And that's why we gave in our report one of the recommendations, which is devoted specifically to these statistics, saying that comprehensive and consistent statistics should be maintained on cases where prosecutors or their families are harmed of their professional activities, and also which means of protection were applied. Actually, another recommendation says that means of protection should be prescribed by the law, and these measures should be provided in case prosecutors applied to the respective responsible body. But we provide also several examples. Several countries have provided us with such information that there are examples when prosecutors are or were murdered or injured because of carrying out their duties. So we encourage countries, first of all, to to pay more attention to this problem and include specific protection measures in their legislation, and also collect information about how it works in practice. This is about personal safeguards and about the monitoring of ACN. The first question was about the synergy with other monitoring mechanisms, and it seems to me that the group of states against corruption, Greco, was specifically mentioned in the question. I would like to emphasize that our monitoring mechanisms, they actually are based on the same sources, on the same documents, on the same international standards or best practices. In parallel with development of anti-corruption performance indicators, we also drafted a huge, thick book, which is called the Guide. It's now a draft, which provides a detailed explanation to each of the benchmark in the framework of the monitoring with a reference to specific international standards or best practices. And there we, of course, refer to opinions of our colleagues from Greco, from UNODC, who work on anti-corruption monitoring in the region or in other regions as well. So we consult with each other from time to time. We refer to opinions of each other, and sometimes we even meet by secretariats to discuss common issues. So we will continue doing so. Sometimes, of course, the situation is dynamic, or there are some changes happened between two different monitorings of different organizations. And that's why we cannot just repeat or support conclusions of each other, because the situation changed. But in general, we are trying to ensure this synergy already, and will continue doing it in the future in the framework of our new round of monitoring. What is different is our methodology, because it's based on the indicators, which is unusual even for ourselves in the Secretariat. It's completely new for us as well. But on the other hand, these indicators are also built on international standards, based on international standards or good best practices. And about the possible change of indicators after the pilot. Indeed, now, as I said, we are in the process of pilot, and the pilot reports are expected to be adopted in July this year, 2021. And later this year, we are going to start normal monitoring of all Istanbul Action Plan countries. And between these two stages, we are going to look and see if, for instance, in the process of pilot, we saw that there is a problem of with some indicators, meaning that it's not a problem with the implementation, it's not a problem of the country, but a problem with the formulation of with the wording of a specific indicator. And we need to get rid of this indicator, or we need to change it somehow. Yes, it's possible then. There will be discussion at the plenary meeting, and if we see that the same indicator is problematic for the countries, there is a problem in this specific indicator or benchmark, there will be possibility to change it or to take it off. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And because we talked about Greco, I would like to give the opportunity to Mr. Mărcela to also comment on this point.
Yeah, thank you very much. And thank you for mentioning Greco in this. Of course, there is a need for synergy. And of course, there is why to overlap and why to do something that someone already did. For me, it's I would say, common sense. For that, of course, the Greco Secretariat and the Greco people, and when I say Greco people are the representative of the states that are in the Greco, they are also participating in the monitoring of when it is done by other bodies. One of the example is, of course, is not only OECD, which is, I think, a good example, because the OECD is, I would say, a little bit faster than, for instance, monitoring that is applied by the United Nations of the Convention, because this is the consideration that takes, in my opinion, too much time. The issue about of that synergy and the cooperation and everything is that the reports of the Greco are, I would say, a huge base for the analytical professional data that are collected on the concrete examples and on the concrete points. That saying, I would like to emphasize, we are not measuring perception. We are not measuring the level of the corruption. We are assessing the real situation in our members' country, and then we are issuing the tailor-made recommendations, exactly as what said, because there is always differences between the countries. According to the same standards, they should be applied. So another example of that, of the, let's say, synergy was, you remember when European Union started the anti-corruption program and they issued the anti-corruption report. Okay? So the first report was, I would say of the general point of view, if I may say so. But the other reports, and they use the Greco data, but the other reports, they use the Greco data more often. And that the other reports, in my opinion, shows the example of the starting of the synergy. Of course, the European Union is not a member of Greco, I would say, yet. They are observers in the Greco. But then when they will become a member of the Greco, which I don't think there is any obstacles for that, then I think the synergy could be, even better or even higher, because then they will be, the member of the Greco. So, but when you have the other bodies, our data is open to public. Our data is easily accessible. Of course, when you open the report of 40 and 50 or 60 pages, it is hard to do that. But that's why we have a secretariat. And when the two secretariats or these three secretariats meet each other, then it's a very easy to, I would say, to find the path that is, good for each and the other stakeholder. And I think that it's really, this is something that, we are, let's say, in the business of anti-corruption for a decades. I can say that, it's more than 2 decades. So, and then I think we have, we have examples and we have our reports that are really It's not about perception and not about what we are thinking, but it is what about we found in each and every country. So I'm urging every other anti-corruption body to cooperate, to have a synergy. We are open for that. We are open for the working together in that field, because that field is a world field. It's like a pandemic. Corruption is like a pandemic, like COVID-19. Everyone could be affected. Everyone, and all physicians must work together.
And unfortunately, we see that all countries are.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I would like all of you to comment on a question that we have received, and I'm going to read the entire question. Assuming that at least part of the assets obtained through ground corruption in Eastern Europe and Eurasia will end up being kept or channeled through Western Europe and the USA, would there be a scope for more systematic sharing of inculpatory evidence with prosecution services in these countries? This could possibly be done by civil society in countries of origin, but it may be even by individual prosecutors who want their investigations to be used. This would assume that the Western prosecution services would need to start paying more attention than they generally do now to this type of crime, which doesn't originate in their own countries, but does increasingly affect them. So if you have views on that, Mr. Casco, Mr. Oniani, maybe on the countries where these assets originate from, and Mr. Murcela, Ms. Kövesi on the receiving end.
If I may very quickly, I guess civil society can clearly, present the suspicions which we have, present the information, but that is absolutely not enough for prosecution. So there should be an official follow-up from the prosecutors for the, I would say, the other countries' prosecution to then follow up where the money resides. So we are presenting those kind of evidence or the suspicions, but there is no reaction from the prosecutor. So if the prosecutor's office is captured, then there is no chance you can achieve anything in that regard. But we would love to, definitely.
So in order to be heard abroad, you have to be first heard at home. This is what you say. Mr. Casco, any views on that?
Just a few words. I was working for many years as a prosecutor in Ukraine responsible for international cooperation. And from my own experience, also in cases of grand corruption, I can only say that these counterparts like Kleptocracy Unit in DOJ of the United States, Serious Fraud Office in the UK, Swiss Prosecution Service, they're always, in my experience, proactively interested in cooperation. So not just passive and waiting for requests. In my experience, they are proactively interested in cooperation. And I cannot, in fact, remind myself the problems like that with the countries mentioned. But again, ACN is now preparing very useful study on grand corruption. And I think that all these issues can be also covered within this study. So if there are any matters or tools which can be improved in international cooperation, for instance, if they are talking about joint investigation teams, if some countries are not still applying this instrument and something like that, I think this study can be very helpful in identifying these problems and also recommending the countries to change something for better. Thank you.
Thank you. And I personally know that the civil society in Ukraine, it has groups that cooperate very well at the international level with prosecutors in other jurisdictions. But this is a good heads up for everybody in our region about the proactivity of other other prosecutorial and law enforcement bodies. Any views on this from Ms. Kövesi or Mr. Murcela? Ms. Kövesi, yes.
Okay. So I would like to answer just underlying the added value of the EPPO. What this means, we will have a case management system. This means that all the cases we will have in electronic format. Here in central level in Luxembourg, we will have case analysts, financial investigators, so they can connect all the dots. They can put together all the information. This means that the information will be circulated very easy inside of the EPPO. We have to take into consideration that the European delegated prosecutors are an absolutely novelty. So they will not be any more constrained by the inherent limitation of the national system to conduct their investigations. Until now, when a prosecutor for Romania, for example, would like to have some information from another colleague, the procedure was very long and not very easy all the time. And you could get the information after 2 years, depending by the member states. This will be eliminated because now the European delegated prosecutor from Romania will call directly his colleague from Germany, from Spain, and the information will be circulated very, very easy. Secondly, EPPO will have a unique capacity to obtain, aggregate, and analyze all the information at European level, having this electronic system named case management system. Also, we can have a capacity to conduct investigations simultaneously in different member states, because we will do that with our ADPs. The main important added value of the EPPO is the fact that the European delegated prosecutors will be able to use evidence administered in another member state without heavy formalities. Also, EPPO will have connections with OLAF, Eurojust, Europol, with the other European institutions, and it will be easier for us to identify and freeze criminal assets. So I think in this way, we can have a real difference about what was before having a PPO and what it will be with the EPPO.
So right to EPPO. The information will be consolidated there and channeled to where it needs to be channeled and not where it shouldn't be channeled.
Yeah, and also we are trying to have now working arrangement with not participating member states, with the third countries, and in this regard, Europol, Eurojust, OLAF will be the main partners to share the information, to use their contact points that were developed during the years, and I think in this way it will be easier for the prosecutors to obtain information, to change information, to identify assets that can be freezed.
Thank you very much, Ms. Kövesi. President Murcela, if you have any views on this? No?
No, well, nothing. I mean, you know, to have this saying that the crime does not recognize borders is already a shabby, you know, we heard that all them. So I think the cooperation is necessary. You know, the exchange of data information is necessary. I just have a little bit uncertainty about how that could be used with the NGOs, because NGO is not member of the prosecutorial service. So, but you know, the big picture is, of course, the prosecutors needs to cooperate, the police needs to cooperate, because there is no fight against corruption without that cooperation. Thanks.
What we have seen is that in countries where the prosecutors were a bit lethargic, it was the civil society that gathered the information, which was already available, and pushed it through to other jurisdictions where those jurisdictions have competence.
This lethargy could be solved by the NGO. This is one medicine, but even efficient medicine is independent media.
Yeah. Usually these NGO movements include investigative journalists. Without them, it's hard to go to that length. Ms. Kövesi, I would like to come back to you because I misinterpreted the question earlier, and also because you have received further questions. So the question was not about corruption inside the EPPO, but what can you do when there are clear indications of threats to the independence of your prosecutors? And then a more institutional question that involves Article 6 of the EPPO regulation. The office shall be accountable to the EU Parliament, to the Council and to the Commission for its general activities and shall issue an annual report. Do you believe these rules could undermine the external independence of EPPO towards EU political institutions? The EPPO could become a political topic and can be directly subjected to influence of EU political entities. That's the question. And I would add that this is a very good comment to make enter the floor the issue of accountability and where accountability starts and where it ends and where it impedes on independence.
Related to the first question, one of my main responsibility will be to be sure that all the prosecutors in EPPO, even if they are European prosecutors or European delegated prosecutors, will be and will act as independent prosecutors. This will be my main job. If we will have information, the fact that someone tried to interfere in the activity of our colleagues, we don't have, let's say, real means. I cannot send a complaint somewhere. Like, for example, in some member states, there is the possibility to send a complaint to the Superior Council of Magistracy to defend the independence of the prosecutors. But I think we have the college. We can do that inside of the college. And also we have a few legal provisions to defend the independence of our colleagues. It's Article 17, if I remember well, saying that a member state may not dismiss or take disciplinary actions against the European delegated prosecutor for reasons connected with her or his responsibility without the consent of the European chief prosecutor. So if this attempt to break the independence of the prosecutors will be through a disciplinary, for example, to a disciplinary procedure, they cannot do anything without the consent of the European chief prosecutor. Or in the end, with the consent of the college, because if the European chief prosecutor does not consent to this request, the member states can send a request to the college to review the matter. And as I said earlier, the way how our activity will be, I think we have, at least in theory, a lot of guarantees for our independence. But as I said before, and the other panelists said, it's important also the quality of the prosecutors and how they will act, if they will be real independent or not. Related to the second question, of course, as a European chief prosecutor, I have to be responsible, and the regulation said that in each year we have to publish an annual report and to present in front of the European Parliament, Council and the Commission. I don't think this activity can broke the independence of the EPPO or the European chief prosecutor of the European prosecutors. In the end, we do not work for us. We work for the society, for the European citizens, and the transparency in our activity should be one of the important lines. I think annually we have to present our results. Also, we have to present some analysis of our work, maybe the main typologies, maybe the legal provisions that are useful in our activity or not, maybe now speaking about the European Public Prosecutor Office, maybe we should explain if the national provisions help our investigations or not, what are the vulnerabilities and risks in our activities. And I think doing that, we don't have any kind of problems that our independence is affected. If the job of EPPO will be a political topic, I'm sure that there will be situations that the politicians will attack EPPO, will discuss about EPPO. Based on my previous position, I saw that all the time when you have investigations related to financial fraud or corruption to high level, and the politicians are involved in the investigation all the time, the activity of the prosecutor office can become a political topic. But our job is to make investigation. Our job is to make a very strong and efficient investigation, respecting all the rules, respecting the fundamental rights. And the job of the politician is to debate, and we should avoid to enter in those debates if it will be the case. I'm expecting to, after EPPO will be operational, to have also campaign to attack or to try to intimidate some European delegated prosecutors or European prosecutors. But let's say that the last years were a good training for me, and we are prepared to challenge with this.
Thank you very much. I would now like to invite you for your closing remarks, unless we receive more present questions in our question and answer box. I will start with Mr. Murcela, and I would like him to comment, maybe touch upon the issue of one size fits all. Do we use the same tools everywhere, or have you seen that we need to adapt the tools dependent on the country specificity, the level of corruption, the level of maturity of the judiciary or the prosecution service or law enforcement in general? So what are your views on that? Can we have common tools for everybody, or do we need some more in some contexts than others?
Well, it is like vaccine, you know. It's like if you have a flu shot, for someone will help, for someone will not. It depends on what kind of the virus is. If the virus is very strong, then you need a vaccine that is combined with a different antivirus mechanism. If you have a simple cold, then maybe just the nose drops will be enough. So this is also goes to the corruption. If you have a serious problem, then you have tackled that with the serious means. But the issue is, as I mentioned that before, it has to be tailor-made approach, because the situation is not everywhere the same. But the important thing is you don't have to invent anything else. Everything is already invented in the fight against corruption. There are many tools and many standards. You just have to find out where they are. Most of them are in the Greco reports. And you have to find a way to implement that with the political will and with the good people. So that is I would say, the final remarks. And I would like to thank all of you for letting me participate and say these words that are, let's say, my final words in that. And I hope that will be another opportunity maybe to discuss the independence of the judges.
Thank you very much, Mr. Murcela. I know you have to leave. Thank you very much for being with us so far. I think I would like to move to Mr. Kukaruk and ask the same question. The same set of tools or different tools for different uses? And linked to that, I think, in my own opinion, is the question that we received about the lack of similar stories from Western democracies, as we hear from our colleagues from Georgia and Ukraine. Nepotism in appointing people to top positions in the prosecution service. Why don't we hear about these kind of stories from Western Europe? Do they not happen, or is this a very well-kept secret? And the system works anyhow. Provocative questions, please, Andrew.
Yeah, thank you, Laura. First of all, as you already understood, in the framework of our monitoring, we are trying to switch to the same rule for everyone, for the same rules or tools for everyone. During our previous monitoring rounds, we used tailor-made recommendations, very adjusted monitoring reports, and that was a question to the Secretariat regarding the methodology, why we apply different rules to different countries. So that's why that was actually the reason why we decided to change the methodology and try to apply the same indicators to all countries under the monitoring. And I agree with Mr. Murcela that all standards all rules are already in place. Yes, they can be adjusted somehow. I can take an example of confiscation. Yes, there are different types of confiscation. There is non-conviction based confiscation, there is extended confiscation, criminal confiscation. The main result is actually confiscation. And doesn't matter which exactly tool you apply, perhaps which the most fits your legal system. But there is a variety of different instruments, and it's possible to choose. Of course, sometimes we understand that those legal tools should be adjusted to different legal systems. But regarding the question about why there are no cases of interference or related to the independence of prosecutors, sometimes I see those cases. There are, perhaps much less, and the scope of the problem is different. And the reasons are multiple, I can say. Yes, the cultural reasons may exist. The actual atmosphere of the respect of the rule of law. And we should also remember that in many jurisdictions, these rules of atmosphere of the independence of judges, prosecutors, they were like cultivated for many years. That may be another response. But unfortunately, we hear about these cases everywhere around the world. The difference is the scope or the frequency of the cases or the scope of the problem. So.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kucharuk. Mr. Kasko, also on the question of same tools or different tools, I think you touched upon maybe a nuance in this debate. And I think you said, let's first clean up the house and then employ all these beautiful new tools. If you can develop that line of argument a little bit.
I also noticed this question from the participant about why didn't we hear stories like in Ukraine and in Georgia, in Netherlands, Germany and other countries. This is really the difference between old democracies and new democracies. But again, today they heard stories about Canada, United States and other countries. As Andrei said, maybe the deepness of the problem is different and the scope of the problem is different, but in fact, the answer to your question will depend on this. So on one hand, in my view, of course, all this medicine should be adjusted or tailor-made for specifics of the countries. On the other hand, again, in my opinion, the key safeguards, the key standards should exist for all the countries. And the prosecutors in Canada, US, and all democracies should also remember that these safeguards are well established and should be obeyed in practice. So in my opinion, we need to have this framework, at least that every senior prosecutor take in mind that there are red lines he or she cannot trespass, cannot violate, in fact. That is why I think that the key safeguards are important for every country, making no difference is it new or old democracy.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kasko. Last thoughts from Mr. Oniani on this point, or maybe others too?
I think I laid out pretty much the answer to this question in my opening remarks. So I'm pretty sure that the response should be very much tailored to the challenges. We should not be kind of process-oriented. We should be goal-oriented. And otherwise, we're going to end up there is this funny joke I love to quote again. So the two people are running to the train station, and they find out that they missed the train which left just 5 minutes ago, and one turns to the other saying, so it's good that we were running, otherwise we would be 1 hour late. So I don't buy this. I mean, we need to be clearly goal-oriented. And Georgian example, also the previous one of the successful anti-corruption reforms, it shows that it's not something that we used to make to believe that, I mean, we're doomed to have corruption everywhere, and always, that we're doomed to live in these circumstances, that they are the privileged few who are getting benefit of the public goods, from the public goods. No, I mean, we Georgians, our generation knows that the results, the anti-corruption effort does bring results if there is clear political will behind that, behind those efforts. If there are people who really want to bring about change. So I'm very much to the targeted approach and to the, as Mr. Marcello said, with the specific and well-trained and well-placed people who would want to bring this change about.
Thank you very much, Mr. Oniani. And now we move to our last but not least of the invitees, Ms. Kövesi, your last remarks and also your thoughts about using the same tools everywhere or maybe needing to adapt them on the particularities of the corruption level in some countries. You have to unmute yourself, if you can unmute.
Okay.
Yes.
Now,
good.
Can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Well, I'm sure that there are no clean countries. So maybe the level of corruption is depending not only by the statistics, it's depending also by the political will to fight with that phenomena. It's depending by the efficiency of the law enforcement, prosecutors and police officers to open investigation, to detect crime, to open investigation and to prosecute. It's depending by the legislative tools that the judges has to finalize the cases, maybe in 1 year, 2 years, not in 10 years or another issues. But after this debate, I think the most important thing is related to the independence of the judiciary in general, and especially the independence of prosecutors. But when I'm thinking to the European Public Prosecutor Office, I have to say that this is a great adventure. It's a huge challenge for me and for my colleagues to set up, first of all, this office, and secondly, to transform this office in an efficient, strong, and independent institution. And this will not be easy, but I count on the support of all the member states, or of the prosecutors and judges in the member states, and also on the international organization like OECD. I count on the support of the civil society, will be very, very important when we speak about our activity. And I hope having a PPO, we can protect better the European value, citizens and financial interest. But all we need is consistency and to keep the European interest at heart. Thank you very much for your attention and for the invitation. And I hope in the next coming years, I can share with you a lot of challenges that the European Public Prosecutor's Office have.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Ms. Kövesi, and good luck with the setting up of the office. It is indeed a big adventure. With that, I would like to conclude today's meeting. I think we had a vibrant discussion, and I want to thank you, each and every one of you, for your contribution. And a big thank you to OECD ACN for not only organizing this webinar, but also producing performance indicators in areas which are very volatile. And, you know, we always hear that it's all about perception when it comes to the independence of prosecutors and fight against high-level corruption. I think it is important to show that it's not just perception. It's also raw data, hard data that supports one opinion, one view or another. So I would like to thank you very much. Thank you very much to Olga also, who's the person behind the scene, and thank you for showing your face. Thank you, and hope to see you soon in person. Thank you very much.
The recording has stopped.
Thank you, Andrei.
Many thanks, Laura.
Thank
Great
you.
moderation.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye.